left, right.
Yo, what's up, SipTalk podcast, YouTube, and audio podcast listeners? It's been an interesting week. Last week has felt like a month, so trying to get this online just so you can hear our take on it. I appreciate the feedback, and I look forward to you guys subscribing, liking, and commenting. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Process failure.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome to episode 44 of SipTalk. Just going to do a quick recap and some current events because it has been kind of a wild week. Last week we talked about politics. And we talked about
kind of previewed the debate and then talked about a couple different political issues or whatever. And boy, has a lot happened since then.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to get into too much politics before the debate. I mean, I still hate talking about politics. It's just I just find it so divisive. But I'm gonna pop open a beer. What are you drinking down there?
The usual Milwaukee's Best Ice at room temperature.
I got a Blue Point partnered with Presidente. It's called Una Fria. I got a cold one. No.
Yeah, so Saturday night I ended up buying myself a really nice bottle of beer, like one of those kind of like wine bottle sized bottles of beer. It was a sour made by Goose Island.
Oh, I like Goose Island.
I love sour beers. It's just they're really hard to find, and like also hard to find in quantities that are affordable.
True. So let's do a little recap on the week. So we got we hit that debate. Obviously, we skipped out anything current. We talked about aliens because aliens.
Yeah, right. So the debate happened, and then there's everyone's reaction to the debate, and then Thursday and Friday is when Trump tested positive for coronavirus. Then there was a whole bunch of coronavirus news, and then swirling around that is the battle for the Supreme Court, which is also somewhat related to the coronavirus outbreak. And then there's also the ongoing problems with the economy and another round of stimulus payments and economic relief for a variety of people who I'm sure very much still need it.
So, but it's funny that we're talking about this because Trump's tax returns were released right before any of this happened.
Yeah, like 4 days beforehand.
And I'm wondering if some of this is a bit of a stunt to completely distract the American people from the fact that Trump paid $750 in taxes, which there are some arguments for that I completely agree with, but I still think that's fucking wild.
Well, I mean, this is actually a topic that I know quite a bit about because it's what I do. So him paying the $750 in tax or whatever it is going. So the main driver of that is going to be what's called a net operating loss, where he has all these different businesses that in prior years had been running massive losses. And so if you run a loss in a given year as a business, well, you're not going to have to pay any tax because besides like the payroll taxes and stuff that you have is just part of operating. But in terms of tax on the profits of your business, you're not going to have to pay any tax because you didn't have any earnings. And so they allow you to accrue those losses and be able to carry them forward to the next year. So if this year I lost $10,000, I paid no tax, and then I carry that $10,000 loss forward to next year. So next year, if I make $20,000, I can take the $10,000 loss from this year and apply it to next year, and I only have to pay tax on $10,000, even though I earned 20. With the idea being that you have to pay in cumulative earnings. And so the question as to whether or not Trump's taxes are legit or not is whether or not the losses that were generated by those businesses were actual losses, or whether he used a variety of accounting tricks or straight up fraud to create losses when there actually weren't any.
Yeah, that's the other part of it. But I do think there's a good chance that he's probably carried over some losses and some serious losses, and he has probably some great tax incentives for new construction buildings and things like that that I think are very much legitimate. So I do think before we all go crazy and react, we need more information. And
When I saw the story, the first thing I thought was, I want to look at the forms. I don't want to look at someone's interpretation of what they say. I want to see what the actual forms look like.
but you and I think like that rather than react because we are critical thinkers. And people are just simply hearing this news and reacting to it, not putting any actual depth of thought into what it could be. And
Yeah.
you
But
know,
also the thing, look, once you look at the forms or whatever, they're only going to tell you so much, because if most of his tax benefits or whatever are coming through the form of these NOL carry forwards, then I would want to know, all right, what businesses are they associated with and how did the business generate those? And on his personal return, you're not going to see that information, because it's either going to be, if it's on his personal return, then it would have to be either interest in a partnership or an S corporation. And those come through by what's called a Form K1. And the K1 gives kind of a summary of your allocated percentage of what the business did, but you don't get to look at the business's financials. This is just like Justin DiGiulio's portion of such and such a business, but you don't get to look at the financials of the business on the K1. It's just a snapshot.
Yeah.
So it would be impossible to tell, even if we were to look at all of Trump's forms, to know whether or not it's legit accounting or not.
Sure, and that's why I think the audit comes into play. And I think I just think reacting now is a bit premature. But
well, the audit coming into play is bullshit, because the IRS has flat out said you can release your tax returns and it will have no bearing on our procedures with the audit. We already have all the stuff that we need to do. We just need to reach a decision. You putting this information out publicly won't change the result of our audit. You can do that. So that's a bullshit excuse, because the IRS has said it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think an audit would help reveal exactly what's going on if we were able to, like, that's what an audit is for. Is they're going to dig in and find out exactly what's going on with his taxes. But I just think it's funny for someone saying I'm pro-America, greatest businessman in the world, to not be paying any taxes, because I feel like those two statements are a bit conflicting. That I'm very pro-America, yet I don't pay anything to America, and I make so much money because I'm a businessman. And even
actually, I make so much money as a businessman, but my tax returns show me that all my businesses are hemorrhaging money. So I think that you're right to identify that there's two hypocrisies there. One is I love America, I support America, but you don't pay any taxes. And two is I'm a great businessman, but all my businesses are losing money.
Yeah, I think I'd like to learn a little bit more also. And I'll get again. I haven't made a conclusion on this. Maybe he doesn't pay a lot in taxes, but donates tens of millions of dollars to charities.
That would be something that that would probably have been something that would have come across in the reporting, because that would be a very easy figure to find on the tax returns. Remarkably easy.
I'm sure it is, but I'm not looking. I'm just saying there's sure, if you want to say you're very pro-America, you give back a lot, yet you don't pay any taxes, you should.
And you also can't use charitable deductions to reduce your taxable income below a certain amount. There's a cap in terms of what percentage of your taxable income you can claim as charitable donations. Off the top of my head, I think it's 60% in a year. So if you made $100,000, you can only deduct up to $60,000 of charitable donations in that year, and then any excess will carry forward into another year. So you can't use charitable donations to reduce your taxable income down to zero and pay no tax.
Yeah, well, no, you wouldn't be donating all to charity anyways.
But even if you did, you wouldn't be able to use charitable donations to negate your taxable income.
So let's get off the tax returns though, because we don't have enough information anyways. We can speculate one way or the other.
No.
But I think the tax returns are, there's not enough there to grasp at to make any determination.
No, but I want to reiterate, I think your two key takeaways about the two hypocrisies are really important. I think that those are two conclusions that you can draw.
And a great businessman, but the two don't really,
But you don't pay taxes, so you're not helping America. And if you're a great businessman, then why are you losing all this money?
Exactly. So what else? So we had the debate, which was miserable to watch. 5 or 6 minutes in, it hit me that in the beginning I was like, all right, so they're kind of both finding their pace. But then 5 or 6 minutes in, I was like, well, we're still kind of doing this. It never smoothed out, and it was just kind of this barking dogs. I do like that Biden kind of brought himself above what was happening there and addressed the camera directly. I thought that
at times he did well with that. Yeah,
I thought breaking that fourth wall was a really cool idea. I don't know where he came up with it. I'm curious if he'll do it in the second debate, if there even will be a second debate. If he'll do it in the second debate, and if Trump will take a page out of that book and do the same thing. So I haven't heard much feedback as to how the general public. Well, if you're watching on live, let me know what you think. Did you like Biden breaking the fourth wall, or did you like Trump staying one-on-one, mano-a-mano, or two-on-one?
Polls out there. Everybody, not everybody, obviously, but the vast majority of people surveyed found that Biden was much more direct and forthright with his answers. My favorite moment of the debate was they had it in 6 segments. And so the first segment especially, but all of them to large degrees, were just this constant bickering back and forth where neither candidate could really put together a thought because one of the two was interrupting each other or whatever. But at the end of the first segment, Chris Wallace butts in and says, okay, we need to end the segment and move on or whatever. And Biden just as an aside be like, oh, that was a productive segment. Like aware of how stupid everything was. I was just like, all right, that's hilarious.
Well, he did at times bring himself kind of above what was going on. And Trump felt as if the moderator was against him, but it was because the moderator had to work the most to moderate Trump.
Completely agree.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think he was arguing policies against him or really, for or against what he was saying. It was just his job to moderate. And I think a really good idea, I listen to a lot of podcasts and radio shows where people call in, and sometimes the caller will just go on and on and on. And then the host will try to answer the questions, but then they can't because the caller's still going on. And I always wonder, why don't they just cut the mic? Why don't they cut the audio feed?
So that's a proposal for the next debate.
So, early on in the first debate, I was wondering, is there any way to just say, hey, we're going to cut the mics? And
the rules of the debate prohibited that in the first one, but the debate commission has definitely looked at that. I don't know whether or not they're going to be implementing that for next week, but that's one that got a lot of traction among people online and just the general public saying like, hey, it would be a great idea if we could just kind of press mute on one of the candidates if they go over their time or if they're interrupting excessively. And so I personally think that it's a great idea. And to your point about Trump bickering about Chris Wallace as a moderator or whatever, well, yeah, like towards the end of the debate, I actually felt bad for Chris Wallace because he was just getting walked all over by these guys, and there was little that he could do. But yeah, if you look at the scorecard in terms of number of times one candidate interrupted the other during the debate, it favors Trump by about 5-1. So if you think about it in sports terms, like one candidate was getting all the fouls called against him, but he was the one who was fouling. So, and from my experience refereeing, the teams that have all the fouls getting called against them are the ones that are going to be more likely to complain about the referee, regardless of whether or not the referee is doing a good job or not. You call more fouls against the team, they're going to be upset about it.
Regardless of who's winning.
Yep.
Fouls has nothing to do. Yeah, reffing and fouling and calling the plays. That has nothing to do with who's winning. It just makes it makes especially the referee not want ultimately, deep down inside, not be for that team that's giving him so much of a headache. But really,
when I do my games these days, when I back when I was doing captains meetings, because of COVID they don't want us doing it, which whatever. But what I would tell the captains meetings is I wouldn't give them too many instructions about what I want in the game. I just said, hey guys, the harder I have to work, the less happy everybody is.
I like that. So debates. Is there a vice presidential debate tonight? I think
Tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. It's Wednesday.
Yep.
Somebody just commented something on that. So vice presidential is tomorrow. So I'm actually very interested to see. I don't remember Pence in the last one. Maybe I missed it. But yeah, I don't remember him.
I don't remember the vice presidential debate from 4 years ago at all.
But I do want to watch this one because I'm curious. Pence.
It's a very big clash of styles.
Yeah, I think Pence is going to get run over. I don't see. I mean, he hasn't really done very much. He's not a very super public guy. So
He's mostly just an apologist for Trump.
yeah, but Trump's got a big personality, so he spends a lot of time in the shadows. That's another reason why I'm curious to. He's also very religious. I think.
Yes, very much so.
Is he the guy that calls his wife mom?
I don't know about that, but I do know that he has, from multiple sources, everyone's just like, yeah, this dude's super religious. And even people that are religious, like, yeah, this dude's kind of out there.
Yeah. He calls his wife mother, actually.
Really?
Yeah, that's a little weird.
That's super weird.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, maybe Freudian.
Well, it'll be interesting because Kamala Harris, from her time as a prosecutor, is going to be that she has just a lot of experience in debate and thinking on her feet and asking pointed questions.
Yeah, well, true.
What are the people saying? What are you laughing at?
I'm just somebody confirmed. Yeah, he calls her mother, and people don't know that, which is just.
I didn't know that.
That's fucking weird, man.
No, yeah, it's super weird.
I don't get it. I don't get it. So let's get out of the presidential, vice president.
Well, what about? And we've missed one big story that happened over the last 5 days.
I think that's about what I'm going to mention. But go ahead.
Trump getting coronavirus.
That's not what I was going to say.
What were you going to say?
I was going to talk about the Supreme Court, but let's talk about the coronavirus thing because right now I actually believe I listened to Dr. Drew yesterday, and he was talking about the cocktail, the drug cocktail, the pharmaceutical cocktail, fucking cocktails. I'm going to get another beer. Hang on. Doing my dough. Speaking of cocktails, talking about the amount of drugs that Trump is on, and
it's a lot.
The side effects of these drugs. And I can't think of a better phrase, whatever he used, but kind of the slight mania that you get from using the steroid and how you feel fucking phenomenal. So
yeah.
So he's leaving. He left the hospital today, feeling phenomenal. Ripped off his mask, going up these stairs there. What do you?
Yeah, but if you watch a video of it from when he was kind of out on the balcony facing the supporters and the press or whatever, there's a crazy video that you can see where, like, when it's zoomed in, you can actually see that he's actually really struggling to breathe.
Well, that could be the steroids and whatever else he's on masking that. Masking that because they're bringing him up when the real issue is still going on.
Yeah,
and I think there's a pretty high probability that's what's happening right
now. So when the news broke, so Thursday night, it happened at about 1 a.m. I was asleep when the news broke, but I remember my roommate had a friend over, and the news broke that his advisor Hope Hicks had tested positive, and they had been on the same plane back from, I think it was Cleveland, back to DC. And they're like, all right, they were in the same plane. She's one of his closest advisors. And I'm like, they've had contact or whatever. Like, if this were ever the chance for Trump to get it, this would be it. And I just went on this rant about how, like, I don't believe in karma because for me, I just don't do metaphysics. And I don't think that there's some guiding force in the universe making things right and wrong. But I do believe in poetic justice, and which is similar to karma, but it's not necessary. It's just sometimes shit happens.
Yeah.
And I just said, for someone who has spent basically since the outset of the coronavirus minimizing and debating whether or not it was a real threat and really criticizing any actions that were taken that hampered the economy in the name of preventing coronavirus, and for someone who has flouted wearing masks and insulted people that wear masks and insulted people that take precautions to not get coronavirus, like what greater irony would there be that not only does he catch coronavirus, but that it may end up killing him?
Well,
Which I'm not hoping for, by the way.
That's what I've been telling people. I don't care that much for Trump as a president or as a person. Like, and some of his policies I think are okay actually, but I don't want to get into that. But I think wishing death on the president is pretty lousy. But also, people have been like really digging into all of the details of, he's on this medication and he's doing this, and he was stepping up the steps and we noticed his breathing was a bit labored or his face was a bit red. Or I heard somewhere in the news this morning, like at a certain point, like you got to stop digging and just kind of accept what it is. What is and everybody is like, oh, we have the right to know this, this, and this. And somebody on the news this morning was like, Reagan got shot, but people wanted to know his general condition, but they weren't like demanding to know his white blood cell count. Everybody now is demanding to know literally every single thing as it happens up to the minute. And I think we just got to have some patience, let it play out. We hope the president doesn't die. And if you don't like the president, maybe you hope it slows his campaign down a little bit and it makes him look like a fool, because it does. And and just let it play out. And if he gets sicker because he does some dumb shit, like that's what happens when you do dumb shit.
Yeah, I very much do not want him to die. And what if you were to ask me what is my ideal outcome, it's I want him to lose this election in a landslide that is so commandingly powerful that no matter what level of bullshit he spews about it being rigged or whatever, it's just undeniable that not only did he lose, but he was massively unpopular when he lost. And then once he leaves office, because one thing that's really frustrated me for pretty much the duration of Trump's public life has been that he does all these profoundly shitty things and has managed to escape consequences for them, I think, every single time.
Well, that's one of the big things I don't really like about Trump is that he does this bad stuff and he just has a lifetime experience of spinning this stuff and literally just kind of like, the guy basically he kind of cheats his way to the top and spins his way up. This guy's constantly scoring touchdowns. Flags were thrown and finds a way for just the game to go on without review, and they pull the flag back.
Yeah, and so what I want more than anything else is for him to have all that privilege stripped away and have to face the consequences that any normal person would have had to have faced. So let him have to actually go to court for all the tax issues that he has in New York, and like let him have to face the consequences that you could make the argument that he's ruined this country in a lot of ways.
I think he has sown a lot of divisiveness, and I think that's why China and Russia are super pro-Trump, even though they don't like his policies, but they realize that he is sowing division throughout the United States.
That's why Russia loves him. China's in between.
Well, but because he's affected the Chinese economy. That's why China doesn't like him.
Yeah.
But China's not fully against him because they understand the damage that he's doing to the U.S.
Well, they also understand that he's easy to manipulate.
Yes, but that's, again, I'm not super, I don't think all of his policies are terrible, and I respect to a degree some of his politics. Like, he was elected to do certain things, I think, and we'll talk about the Supreme Court nominee in a minute. But from his position, he should be full force for all the things that he believes that he represents. And
yeah, but the thing is, he didn't even really have, like, he claims this whole mandate from the election in 2016 or whatever, but it wasn't even that. He lost the popular vote by 3 million. So it's not like even the majority of the country wanted him. The reason why he won is because we've got a stupid system of how we pick our presidents because of the Electoral College. So he didn't even have a mandate.
yeah.
So don't give me this. He has this powerful force behind him of the American people voted him to do a job. No, they didn't. They didn't. A select few states, and a few states, like 15,000 people swung the vote, and that went 100% of the state went to him. So no, he didn't have this mandate in 2016.
But
And
think about the people, and that's not saying that the general population even would have voted for him, because so many people. Do you know what the number is kind of for voter turnout?
it's usually between 45 and 50%. Let's find out.
50%? I thought it was closer to 15%.
No, it's much higher than that. It's between 45 and 50%. General election voter turnout. All right.
Hold on. Well, you're looking that up, Doria. If you're on, which I saw you joined a little while ago, Doria did a cameo in one of our earlier podcasts, but she sent over a nice birthday bottle of scotch. It's a Lowland Scotch malt Bladnoch. Beautiful bottle. Very
nice presentation. I agree.
Very solid, heavy container, but I'm not familiar with it. So,
all right, I was wrong. So 2016 voter turnout.
Hey, can you give me a second here?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you to Doria. She hasn't commented, but I saw she joined earlier, and I did send her a video thank you. But I want to thank her for the video bottle of scotch. And I was planning to wait for you to come up here, James, and open it up. And
well, I very much want to. It's just a matter of when New York relaxes quarantine restrictions.
Tell me about that. But super thank you to Doria, and looking forward to trying a new scotch, because I do drink a lot of scotch, but I haven't heard of this one, and it looks phenomenal.
Yeah, it looks like a really cool bottle.
So on that note, though, I said about 15%. You said 45 to 50%. What's it really look like?
2016, the official figure is 55.5.
55.5%?
Yes.
Oh, fuck. Really? 138
million people out of 250 million eligible voters.
Eligible.
You got kids and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay.
So out of 250 eligible voters, 138 million, 138,847 was the voter turnout. So about 55%.
Which is roughly a third of the population.
What?
A little more than a third of the total population?
No.
150?
U.S. population is about 330 million, and 140 330, so it's like 40%.
Okay, yeah. So a little more than a third, 40% of the total population, but roughly a little over half of the total voting population.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's think about who votes.
Old people.
Who else?
I'm done.
But yeah, traditionally old people, and majority, I think, white people. What's the education? What do those stats look like in education and voting?
I have no idea. That would require a much deeper dive than what I was able to find in a 30-second search.
Yeah, but I think it's the population of people who are solid, recurring voters.
The only one I know for sure is old people.
Old people, which also lean towards Trump.
Not this election.
Well, maybe not this.
That's a major demographic shift is old people very much went for Trump in 2016, but they have shifted pretty hard towards Biden. And you have to think that the coronavirus response is playing some part of that.
But also Biden is old. So
is Trump.
Yeah, but Biden looks older.
Yeah.
And he looks a better version of old. Like if you're like, yeah, I want to be old like that. Like I want to be old like Biden, not like Trump. So
yeah, Biden for being almost 80 years old, like he's done a pretty good job at getting old.
He's got more hair than I do, so that's good.
So the Supreme Court my issue with the Supreme Court 4 years ago, more than 4 years ago, when Antonin Scalia died, that was either in February or March of 2016. And Obama nominates Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. And the Republicans say, who had control of the Senate at the time, said, we're not going to hear any confirmation hearings on any nominees that you make. And the reason they gave was it's a election year and we want to let the election determine whether a Democrat or a Republican president nominates the next Supreme Court justice. Stop. That's the end of the sentence. That's what they said. Is we want the voters to choose who's going to be electing the next president, and therefore selecting the next Supreme Court nominee. So now a very similar situation happens in 2020, but even closer to the election. And now these cunt punters are just going about saying, well, that's because we controlled the Senate at the time and it was a Republican Senate and a Democratic president. And so when you have opposite parties controlling these different branches or whatever, that's one thing. It's another thing when we control both branches or whatever. Like, no, just own up to what you said. You created a precedent out of thin air that didn't exist before 2016. You came up with this idea to justify your shit behavior. And then as soon as circumstances change such that precedent is no longer beneficial to you, you just abandon it like the redheaded stepchild that you didn't want to adopt.
So Lindsey Graham, what exactly did he say? Remind me. He said that if he was in a situation in the next election that you could hold him to it.
Yeah, he said
he wouldn't.
He said, use my own words against me.
How's that playing out in your state? I'm just curious.
So Lindsey Graham is in pretty much a dead heat with the Democratic challenger. And it's an odd one because you've got a lot of people that are motivated to vote this year that might not have been because they're upset with the general state of politics. And then you've got the people that are very loyal to Trump that also don't like Lindsey Graham because of the times that he's broken with Trump. So Lindsey's kind of tried to have his cake and eat it too, and neither eaten nor had cake, because he's kind of at times he's broken with Trump and trying to play towards the middle, and that's lost the Trump voters. And then the times that he's been sycophantic towards Trump is lost some of the moderates that might have been willing to vote for him otherwise. And also the Democrats have a pretty strong candidate in Jamie Harrison. He's well spoken. He's got a lot of likables. He's got good policy visions. He's a strong candidate. And also in a year where racial issues very much matter and Black Lives Matter is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, like the Democrats have nominated a Black candidate for Senate and a strong candidate.
Having spent a lot of time in South Carolina, I think Jamie, from what I've seen, and for what it's worth, I have not seen very much, but I think Jamie Harrison would be a really good leader for the state.
I hope he wins.
I'd actually like to follow. Because obviously I'm not in South Carolina. I don't follow too much, but I think he might be more representative of the state and the population than the aging white old man Lindsey Graham. And I think those old ways are kind of going out. I think
South Carolina is shifting. It is, but slowly.
A heavy shift. And I mean, we moved to South Carolina during the first Obama election, And for me,
Uh,
racism
3
wasn't
months beforehand, yeah.
racism wasn't really something we ever thought about. We thought about race all the time,
I've seen it a good bit down here, but
but before we lived in South Carolina, growing up in upstate New York, for the most part, the people that we knew were white, and the people who weren't white culturally in upstate New York were pretty white culturally.
at least in where we grew up, there's certainly different areas.
What I'm talking about is our experience. You know, if
Oh yeah, absolutely.
somebody was Korean or they were Chinese or they were black or they were Hispanic, we all shop at the same grocery store. You know, like
Yeah, our community and our school growing up or whatever, like it was really homogenous, where it was really like I'd say there was just kind of two groups of people in our school. There were the people that were more rural, of like
yeah,
people that lived out in the farmland, and then people that lived closer to Troy or whatever that were kind of more middle class. Not that like the farmers weren't middle class, but the attitude of kind of rural versus more just middle class professional.
yeah, but I feel
That
like you and I were probably more on the suburban type end.
oh
Although,
yes, very much so. I agree.
you know, but it's funny because you're closer to the mountains, but our school was basically a couple of suburb towns, the mountains, and then farmland.
Hmm.
But I would say that we had this dichotomy of farm, like pickup truck type culture, and then just very kind of standard middle America, middle class suburban culture.
Yeah, and that's very different from Charleston because like in South Carolina in general has just a much higher percentage of the population that's black or other minorities.
But
And
look, I didn't think about racism. I probably said a ton of racist shit, but it wasn't. There was no introspection, and I wasn't thinking about it when we lived in upstate New York. When we moved to South Carolina, especially during the Obama election, the first one, I noticed that there was a pretty hard line, and there's a very big distinction between black and white. And I listen to a lot of public radio, as I know you do too. And I listen to general talk radio, and especially in our first few months there, I was trying to get a feel for a vibe of a reporting style that I liked. So, we were both playing around with a lot of different radio stations.
yeah,
But
you flip the dial until you find stuff that you like.
but I noticed that there was a huge racial divide, black and white, in South Carolina, in Charleston, where we were, and I had never felt that divide. I always thought we were all the same people. We just kind of, we got different backgrounds, we got different stories, we got different families, we look a little different, but that's about it. I did not realize that there was actually this kind of class divide. And in downtown Charleston, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is how I remember it, there's literally one street where below the street is super affluent white families with very expensive renovated homes, 1800s homes. And then above that street is kind of disenfranchised, like mostly black families who the hurricane hit and they didn't have homeowners insurance. And a lot of the houses were in pretty dilapidated shape. But there was a real racial divide, and then there was a real estate value divide.
Yeah, it's shifted slightly in the 12 years since you've been here, but there's still there's been a lot of gentrification that's occurred where a lot of those neighborhoods have kind of been bought out and developed.
If there's that line which runs east to west, and it was mostly white below that line would slowly move further.
Yeah, and when you moved here, and it was when we moved here, and even more so before we got here, that line was Calhoun Street.
Okay. I don't know.
If you remember, Calhoun Street is like King Street, like Upper and Lower King, and
I
like
thought it was King Street, but okay.
King Street's runs north south, so you go on like left to right from King Street, whereas Calhoun Street cuts across the middle of the peninsula.
Okay.
And that because it used to be King Street was divided by Calhoun Street, and Lower King Street would be where all the expensive shops were and a lot of the history and stuff like that, and below about below Calhoun Street and especially below Broad Street towards the Battery, where you'd have all these pre-Civil War homes and stuff. Though, like you're talking $5 to $10 million homes. Some of these places were probably built in the late 1600s and still kept up and just phenomenally beautiful properties or whatever. But once you got above Calhoun Street, it would have been early 1900s to like 1910 to like 1950 construction, and some of those probably got obliterated by Hugo. And
Hugo was the hurricane
1989.
89 that destroyed the majority of the city.
Yeah, the eye of the storm passed over Isle of Palms, which is about 10 miles north of Charleston. Not even.
Yeah, which means they got a short break where the rest of the place.
Right. Yeah. Hugo absolutely leveled Charleston, where I think that the city was without power for like 2 to 3 weeks. And a lot of the people that I know here that grew up here talk about the experience of going through Hugo.
So,
but
right.
there's definitely a huge divide in Charleston in terms of race. But I think it's when I was a substitute teacher, at first I was afraid that the job was making me racist because a lot of my problem students were black. But then when I started to realize what I looked at was what buses were these kids coming from? And I noticed that the problem students that I had that were white were coming off of the same bus as the problem students that I had were black. And the connection that I made was this isn't race. This is the kids that are coming from the very poor neighborhoods where the parents don't care about what the kids are doing, where there's no discipline enforced at home. Those are the kids that are the nightmares in the classroom. And it didn't matter if they were black or white. It mattered what kind of culture they were being raised with in terms of how much respect were they given to adults, how much work ethic were they being kind of indoctrinated with at home, how responsible were they being made to be when there wasn't like a threat of force from their parents or something like that. Well, and so
but that's the crazy thing about living in different cities and also being somebody who thinks like, you just weren't experiencing and not thinking about it, because you could have drawn that conclusion, but you actually thought about it, you did some observing, and you realized that race wasn't the issue. It was geoeconomic
culture.
Yeah.
But socioeconomic for sure. Yes.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's just wild. Lindsey Graham, I don't think is a good representation of maybe not the majority, but a large minority of the state, which has been majorly underrepresented in that state. And I just think it'd be cool to have. I don't know anything about this guy. He is black, so I assume that he will help speak for the black population. I don't know about the other.
Well, Tim Scott is our other senator, and he's black, but he's like as hardcore Republican as it gets. So he's kind of an enigma.
So, but just what I'm saying is, I think I need to learn more about him. But
everything that I've seen from him, like I saw some snippets of his performance in the debate against Lindsey Graham, and I just like him. I like Jamie Harrison. He comes across very well.
We also share that name.
Yeah, sure.
So look, let's because we only got so much time, but let's just quick talk about this Supreme Court change-up. I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg was probably doing her absolute best to hold out life as long as she possibly could, because I feel that she felt that she owed that to her country. So it's really sad to see.
Yeah, when I found out that she died, I wasn't checking the news. My roommate came home from his job and he's like, so Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. And I said, oh fuck, that's not good.
I had heard I think a Radio Lab podcast about her, and there's a couple of movies. She became pretty popular in the last year or so.
Yeah, she became iconic.
But yeah, she really became iconic. And it's wild that like we're talking about the last 40, 50 years of her life, really. And it's kind of all coming to this culmination right now, which I just think, is wild. And it happened right before she died. And now we're talking about a little bit, but still I think she's a bit eclipsed by the election and by her potential predecessor, which is crazy. I don't necessarily know this woman is a good addition to the Supreme Court.
Well, she's most likely going to rule against the Affordable Care Act, which is going to put at minimum 20 to 25 million people out of health insurance. She's almost certainly going to rule against like women's choice rights when it comes to abortion. It's pretty likely that she would rule against any marriage equality or religious liberty issues that would allow people to discriminate against minority groups, namely gays. So a lot of the progress that's been made in the last 10 years or 50 years, if you count Roe v. Wade, 1973, a lot of that progress is deeply threatened by this nomination. And I don't think that there's a lot that the Democrats can do to stop it. The only thing that they're going to be able to do, I think the only path forward for the Democrats to try and equalize in some way is after the election, if they're able to get both the presidency and a majority of both House and Senate, more importantly, is to expand the number of seats on the Supreme Court and say, you guys have dragged us over the coals in 2016 and 2020. Now it's our turn. Which is dangerous because it's just going to escalate the stakes. And
I'm not crazy about that idea. I think the Democrats are a bit crazy and ultra liberal, and like I'm just thinking like this fucking cancel rent culture that doesn't even make any sense.
I don't think that's a serious policy proposal.
No, but I feel like that's that. But it's not. I mean, it's fucking huge. Fucking people. You don't have as much rental.
There's a difference between the people that are protesting in the street and the people that are actually making policy. I don't think that there's anybody out there that's seriously making this as a policy.
But I feel like these crazy, but we got homeless people staying in the hotels right by my house. And and then these people are like making Brooks Brothers went out of business recently.
Yep.
And now there's a fucking cardboard encampment outside of Brooks Brothers. And you say, fuck, like how are homeless people shooting up heroin in the streets and living in the streets outside of these luxury retailers and these luxury buildings? People are paying $10 million for a fucking 2-bedroom apartment on this street, and then outside somebody's camping in a box. Like, that's not cool. And then that person 3 days later wants to chase some kids around with a fucking needle, which is happening all the time too. And
I don't see how you connect this to Democratic policies, though.
What I'm saying is that when you're like, well, we got to get rid of these homeless people in the area, the ultra liberal, the AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez type politicians in the area are like, well, the homeless people have the right to live anywhere. You should not want to live next to this, not in my backyard. You should be open arms having these homeless people stay in the hotels, considering the hotels are shut down. That people are trying to make actual arguments about how we should house homeless people in hotels that cost $600 a night.
Well, there's an argument to be made about housing homeless people in hotels. I think that there's a legitimate policy backing for that.
But that's what I'm saying is that some of this stuff is coming to reality, and it's wild to see. I got a ticket the other day because I turned around in one way because some homeless person was laying in the fucking parking spot.
Yeah, we've all heard the story.
And I got a fucking ticket. Yeah, because it pisses me off. I actually have court tomorrow morning. So, and the cops gave me a hard time, but they didn't give the guy a hard time.
Right. But if we were to use public money to try and find housing for these people, increase the support in terms of the homeless shelters, or temporarily putting these people up in hotels while we try and figure out what to do with them or whatever, then that person's no longer laying in your parking spot. He's in a hotel. He's no longer chasing kids around with a needle. He's in a hotel. He's in a shelter. He's getting help. He's getting his problems identified.
He's in a hotel overnight and he's buying and selling drugs on the street outside of my apartment during the daytime. Or he's high as fuck during the daytime, walking around. I saw a woman with a fucking towel wearing like a diaper today walk in front of the office. She had like a a hoodie on, zipped up halfway, no shirt on underneath, and she had a towel wrapped around her like a fucking diaper, and she was walking like a zombie through the streets, and everybody's just like, holy fuck. But I'm sure she probably slept somewhere comfortable last night. I don't know.
I don't know. Homelessness is a complicated issue, but I don't think that having a completely dispassionate response
But having
furthers the problem.
But having a fully compassionate response that these people have every right, they shouldn't have to work for anything, and that we should be putting them in a $600 a night hotel is not an answer either. So
no,
that's
it isn't.
What I'm saying is that this ultra liberal response to things scares me also. So I'm really,
I'm not going to argue against that.
I'm really, I'm really concerned with that. And again, I think, I think that we really need to wait. If there's any way we can figure out how to do it to confirm this lady, I say we just wait another 2 months and then they can do it. But
well, no, 2 months still. I think your argument is we need to wait until the next president's elected and actually inaugurated into office.
That's why I said 4 months.
Okay, but what about the main policies that I think are going to be under threat are going to be marriage equality, women's right to choose, and the Affordable Health Care Act. And
sure, but the Affordable Health Care Act is relatively new.
2010.
2010, okay. But it's also not great.
I think 2010.
I thought it was a little bit later than that, but I guess it is 2020.
It was phased in. It took 2 or 3 years at least for all of its provisions to kind of fully take effect.
Yeah.
But I think it was signed into law in 2010, either that or late 2009, but more likely 2010. I don't remember, but one of the 2 years or whatever. And yeah, it's not a perfect law, but I think it's improved a lot of things. And I look at it as, what are the consequences of confirming this nomination? It's going to be a 6-3 majority. It means that during his time in office, Trump has been able to confirm 3 out of 9 justices in 4 years. As someone who lost the popular vote by 3 million votes.
These people are appointed for a lifetime.
Yep.
He's got one.
Amy Coney Barrett is 43. She could serve on the court for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Shaping policy for 40 or 50 years by a man who lost the popular vote by 3 million.
Mm-hmm.
And by a Senate that is likely going to change composition in 3 months.
Yeah.
And additionally, I don't think the Republicans can even claim a mandate because, so in 2016 they controlled Congress, they controlled the House of Representatives, but in 2018 they lost the House of Representatives and they lost it bad. So if you want to say what's the most recent election mandate, well, you know what? It's not good for Republicans. They lost the last election bad. It just didn't happen to shift a lot of the governmental power because only 1/3 of the Senate was up for re-election and the president wasn't. But if you look at on aggregate, what the country said about Republican policies in 2018, it was a pretty thorough rejection. So they don't even have to claim an electoral mandate because 2018 said no.
Yeah. So just recap what's at stake. Affordable health care, Roe versus Wade, which is effectively abortions.
Yep.
And what else?
Religious freedom as it's proclaimed by the right. But so Affordable Health Care Act, Roe versus Wade, and marriage equality.
Marriage equality. Okay. Yeah, marriage equality. Big.
And just gay rights in general.
Yeah.
Also voting rights.
What type of voting rights? In what way?
The big case that comes to mind is in Florida in 2018. The state had a referendum that would allow people convicted of felonies to vote.
Yeah.
So it used to be the law that if you were convicted of a felony, you couldn't vote in Florida. So they held a voter referendum where everybody in the state voted on it. And by popular vote, the referendum passed, reinstating voting rights for 1.5 million convicted felons. And immediately after that, the state legislature enacted a law saying that all these felons would have to pay back any outstanding fines or court fees or anything related to their case before they could vote. So even though they had served their time and everything else, if they had outstanding fines or penalties, they had to pay those too before they could vote.
What, in steps?
And, huh?
In steps, Bloomberg.
Well, yeah, that's where we're getting to. And so this battle, like it basically, my view of it is that because this was passed by the Republicans. The Republicans passed the law against the making it so that the felons had to pay their fines. So the Republicans passed this law to restrict people's right to vote because they basically
have to pay fines. They can't vote, but they have to pay the fine.
Right. And the problem with it is the Florida system is so poorly designed that it is very difficult to figure out whether or not you've actually paid up all your fines. In the initial case, the case went through several levels. At the trial level, and then one appeal, and then another appeal. So at the trial level, the people that were arguing against the law of having to pay the fines said, look, Florida's system is so shittily designed that even someone who wants to obey this law is going to have a really hard time doing so, because and they hired experts. They had like a team of doctorates and doctoral candidates in law and procedural justice and stuff like that. And they said, all right, Justin, you were convicted of a felony 5 years ago. You got out of jail 2 years ago. We're going to go and see what your fines are. How much do you have to pay? And they did this for 28 or 30 people. And they were only able to categorically say, we know how much this person owes for one of them, because the systems don't talk to each other, and being able to figure out whether or not these people were paid up and what their balances were was literally impossible for trained professionals to do. And so the problem is, if you're a convicted felon, you want to vote and you try and pay your fines or whatever, you might be able to pay up your fee with the county, but maybe the county jail has a different fee that you weren't aware of. And so if you go out and vote and it turns out that you had some unpaid fee somewhere out there, now you've committed a crime because you voted illegally. So it makes it so that all these felons are like, well, shit, man, I don't know if I've paid up all my fees, but I sure as hell don't want to go to jail again. And voting could put me at risk for going to jail because I don't know whether or not I've done what I need to do. And it's impossible for me to figure out whether or not I can do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. I know what it's like trying to figure out if you have fines and have to deal with that shit. And the fucking court systems are miserable to deal with. The people that work there are usually pretty miserable.
Yeah, it's not a fun job.
Yeah, and they deal with a lot of misery. So if they're not miserable, kudos to them.
Yeah, I put that job at the same level of misery as baggage claims handler at an airport. Let me guess, you're upset.
I mean, that can't be a fun job ever. I guess, maybe if you're the person delivering the baggage to the people that are so already pissed off. The person giving the bag saying hey, here's your bag. Oh, thank you. Finally, I got my stuff back. But the person that has to say let me guess, we lost your bag. That has to be a very short-lived job. That cannot be something you stick at for a long time.
I would have to imagine that anybody that stays in that job and actually enjoys it has some kind of psychopathy.
Well, they may be a bit retarded. All right, look, we are coming up on the 1 hour mark. I'm coming up on the end of my third beer, so I'm going to call it there. I don't even know what we talked about. Politics, current events.
We just recapped the past week. It took us an hour, and we didn't even go into detail on any topic.
No, we didn't. We didn't even get deep. So yeah, that's that. So tomorrow. We'll see how quick this gets edited. Today is Tuesday, October 6th. We'll see how fast it gets online. But tomorrow, Wednesday, is the Vice Democratic debate.
Vice presidential debate. Vice Democratic.
Well, yeah. I mean,
we'll get it in editing.
We won't. So Vice presidential debate, and you should watch it because why not? What else are you gonna watch? Some Netflix shit, or you could be watching us.
There's 44 episodes that you need to catch up on, everybody.
44 episodes. But either way, thank you guys for joining. Thank you, Doria, for the birthday gift. We'll see you guys soon. And James.
Until Thursday, we'll recap whatever happened.
All right, man. See you later.
Peace.
See ya. All right, podcast viewers, you guys made it through the whole thing. Let me know your feedback. Throw in a comment. Really appreciate that. And if you don't already, please subscribe to this podcast. It'll help us out big time, and I will be super, super appreciative of that. Thank you.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.